Distribution provided by Cloud Sigma, the cloud that adapts to you. Visit cloudsigma.com/thisweekend for a free $200 credit.
Lynda.com is an online learning company that teaches software, creative, and business skills. Try Lynda.com for free for 7 days by visiting lynda.com/thisweekend. Today, the web design process. 3 steps: inception, execution, and launch. Stick around and watch us work. Bienvenidos al episodio número 106. Am I even close?
We're like losing track.
Something like 106. I'm a creative. After 100, I just can't count. This is your host, Jose Caballero. I'm Chief Education Officer of the Skool, which is an education company. Joining me always every week, Aure Gimon, ladies and gentlemen, freelance creative director extraordinaire, live from Los Angeles, California, downtown Los Angeles, California, to be exact. If you want to go visit him. And always joining us now, kind of on a regular basis, so I can say always, Tatjana Luethi, who's a graphic designer, and she is actually our lead coach at the Skool. Today's going to be a really awesome episode. It was actually started, it's the second part of an episode we started on process based on one of your questions. User Calle Bra, from YouTube, he actually asked this question: can you do, like, hey, an episode, process for dummies episode. So I'm going to go right into it because this is really important. This morning I had a really great chance to be interviewed by Matt, which I'll give out the information a little bit later, for a video blog. And we're talking about WordPress developers. And one of the questions that somebody asked was, how do you jump from being solo like you are now to being your own boss? Being something a little bit more agency-like, or making more money, basically, is what people want to kind of really find out. And he mentioned, when I mentioned pricing, like our low-budget projects, he was like, whoa, some people here were talking $500, $1,000 for a website. When I said that the group, our low, even during the 3 years of what I call the desert, 30,000 was the lowest we would go on a project, if that makes sense, right? 50 to 30, that's our low projects. And he's like, these are huge numbers for people. But the question of how do you become, your own boss, and how do you develop a process, or the answer is the development of kind of a process and of a service. And we had this conversation outside. Describe to me what the conundrum is, or what the challenge is, as you see it, as your experience.
In order to scale?
Yeah, just in general. I mean, what has been your experience from what you saw me do at the group and what you've done?
I think the biggest hurdle I see is obviously starting to manage people, like taking a role of more overseeing a group of people and maybe doing a little bit less of the hands-on work. And I think having a clear process in order to facilitate that is something that you have to have in order to do it successfully. Because you can't, when it starts to grow, it just gets more complex. The more people that are involved, things just get a little bit more complicated than when it's just you interfacing with the client directly.
So and I've seen that. So you're saying that the issue is that the individual designer or WordPress developer or WordPress designer combo or developer who's trying to be a little bit bigger and do bigger projects, the hardest thing is really managing other people.
I think so, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And for you, and you're dorky, flaky.
Yeah.
What about you, Tatjana? What do you think is that kind of hurdle?
Well, for me, this is a learning experience, and I'm mostly, learning with you and watching you. And I can't really say that I can draw from my experience on that one.
How about management, though? You've seen design managed.
Yeah. I agree with Aure that a lot has to do with how do you manage people, how do you establish rapport, and where they feel valued, and where they really, feel comfortable contributing to the image of the company and the vision of the company.
That's interesting, because I think one of the things that I've seen and I've observed, across the board with flaky dorkies, somewhat, so like me, and an obnoxious, again, if you don't know what we're talking about, we're not just making fun of people. The Phaedo Assessment, which I developed for the Skool, is what tells you what you are. But someone like me who's, even if you're dorky, flaky, but kind of dorky evil, or and a creative, let's say, who's evil, flaky, for example. I've seen people that have the ability to kind of, at least, if they have they're very clear intention to start a business and to grow it, So they research, from their peers around them. They find advisors. They do the right things that you have to do to learn it. And I'm thinking very specifically of someone who mentored me as I was growing the group, or early on, even before I even thought about the group, or the group was even. It's Chris Do from Blind. I always watch how he's doing things, or even my peers. They go out and they actually seek the information that they need and to learn, and they sit there and they observe, and they're spending a lot of time learning.
That's right.
But they have that intention. So I think what the challenge sometimes I'm seeing with people, like I said, in the WordPress community, or a developer who's remote, or a developer who's in India, or a developer somewhere, is that you're looking at it from the technical point of view. You're not looking at it as, forget about the technology.
Yeah.
It's not about technology.
I think that's a really good point. And I remember when we had Seth on like a season or two ago, and he said one of the first things you need to go out and do is, and he's a longtime collaborator. I don't know if people remember that we had him on the show.
And people love that episode.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I mean, I remember something he said, like the first thing that you needed to do was to find a partner that mastered one of those 4 quadrants that you were least proficient in, which was an interesting thing, because I always had this idea, I wanted to partner up with another great creative to produce more creative work. And then it's like, well, what about like all these other quadrants that you need to master in order to like execute projects really well and to run a business well? It's not something that's immediately apparent, but I remember him saying that clearly. The first thing is to find a partner that kind of complements you.
So that's brilliant, and that's actually probably the best advice that you can get. And then going into the specific question, what we're going to talk about today, and we bring up my computer, the inception, execution, and launch phases, the 3 phases of a project. These are mirroring, and so coming back to me, some agencies have 6, some people have 7, 8, 9. Look, there's all these different ways of doing it. The reality is that it's like a movie, beginning, middle, and an end. Beginning, middle, and an end. So if you're trying to conceptualize, so first of all, stop trying to say what is the right way of doing it, because I think technical people, if you took the Phaedo Assessment, which you probably might have if you're watching and you're a long-time watcher, the challenge of a technical person is, and you have this challenge, I'm sorry, I'm here pointing, I'm being accusatory and judgmental.
Oh, I'll point back, don't worry about it.
Is that you want to know exactly how to do it. And if, you know what I mean? You want to know the technical, the right way of doing it.
And resist the urge to get tactical too quickly.
Resisting there.
Yeah.
Well, you're the same way too. But
I was, but I've learned the hard way, right? To not like just try to dive right in there and say, it's done, right? Like just take a step back and try to understand what the people are trying to do, what the problem is from a higher point of view.
There you go. So what Aure just did was describe the natural first phase of a project, which is the inception phase. And let's talk about the inception phase. One of the things that from a definition standpoint, and here in the Skool OS, inception is the first thing. A lot of people call that discovery, and if you come back to me, I'm going to actually find a slide that also shows it bigger. The discovery phase is interesting because agencies and dev shops call it discovery specifically because that's where they find out what the goals are and the needs and all those other good things, right, Aure?
That's right.
I changed the name for the Skool OS to Inception very specifically because I don't want, and this is borrowing from lean startup and borrowing from my experience with startups, I don't want to just find out what we need to build and then give you an estimate, which is the right way of doing it. I actually want to, at the end of it, have a prototype of some sort, like a proof of concept of some sort, visual. So the stylescapes, we've done click-throughs. We do a lot of the design in that inception phase, which usually would be left for the execution phase.
That's interesting.
Like people start design like in execution.
Right.
The traditional discovery phase is more maybe wireframes or a sitemap. Like the first time that I did a big project was Art Center College of Design. It was one of our first really big projects managed by Tony Wong. So the process was kind of managed by him and the team that he brought in. And we got all the way to wireframes and a scope matrix to give us the pricing. So that's it. We didn't start design till the next phase,
Got
right?
it.
So that was a true discovery phase.
Right.
But with startups, CEOs CEOs of startups and other people are too ADD. They want to see it.
That's true.
Like,
and they don't want to
see
commit unless there's something tangible at the end of the engagement.
So also to get people excited, the client excited about what it is that it's going to happen. So us delivering a stylescape and a physical manifestation of it, of a virtual thing that they're never going to see is pretty badass because they get it in there. So bring up the Inception face on my screen, and I'm being a designer. I'm trying to align it perfectly. Damn it, it's still not aligned perfectly, but who cares? So Inception, you're going to do product definition. That is the first step that you're going to take. The second is the information architecture. And again, you're doing a first pass at this. And the third part of the Inception phase is identity and visual design. Very, very simple. So product definition is what we would call the discovery phase. You define the brand. Who are we? If they already have a defined brand, tell them that you're defining the website. User definition, that is the only step. That is the only step that you can't miss. You can skip in that first module, 1.1, you can skip all of them except that one. That's at the end of the day, the only one you need to do. So okay, with that in mind, let's skip to the next one, information architecture. You do user stories, which is articulating the narrative of how a user gets and goes through the site, which is something that so helps you define the functionality. Because the reality is, and if you come back to me, so I can rant, the reality is, it gives me a headache to try to figure out what the hell, to build for a client, because I am not a genius. I don't know what the hell the product it should be, and I could make it up, but then I'm lying because I don't really know if it's going to work or not until you launch it. And trust me, I'm cocky and confident and obnoxious, and early on you're like, no, this is what it should be. Certainly this is what it should be. And then when the business doesn't succeed, you're like, oh shit.
Or when they get into user testing.
Or when they get into user testing and it was wrong. It's like, was I wrong? Who's wrong? So the reality is that I come to the table with I don't know. I have my experience, which is the most authentic thing to share, and I can share that with you, but I can't guide you to success. Ultimately, you're responsible for your own success. Now, that does a lot. It diffuses your client away from that dependency on you. Effed up. You're the developer. I hired you to do the right thing, and you didn't.
Or whether it's your idea versus my idea type thing.
Yeah. Whose idea was it? Whose mistake was it? And you get into a lot of issues there. So be clear on that in the process, and when you're selling your projects, you can't claim to make the business a success. And if you don't say it explicitly, your client's still holding you. If you never said it, if you never said, look, I'm just a developer, I'm just a designer, I'm here to help you implement your vision, but I'm not here to guarantee success. If you never said that, you're kind of in trouble. All right, moving on to the next one. Identity and visual design, like I said. Well, the one thing in the middle one in 1.2 that you can't miss is a sitemap during this phase.
That's right.
I think you can miss wireframes and you can do them in the next phase.
At this phase, yeah, and I like what you said about first pass. You're taking a first stab at everything. That's
everything.
That's right.
So, and it doesn't have to be every single page on the site. It's kind of like the wireframes for the top line or for the top level, and then you can, in the next phase, actually go a little bit deeper during execution. So the next phase, the 1.3, or the third part of the Inception phase, is identity and visual design. The stylescapes, that's where we start. And the stylescapes kind of have the identity, the typography, the iconography, the color palette all in there. Which is funny because all the things in the middle of that part are just what's inside the stylescape. Those are the ingredients. The stylescape is kind of the plate. And then the style guide, which you're going to do production and execution during execution, you might not do the style guide here yet. You might actually wait and do it right before execution or a little bit in the middle. What do you think, Aure? What's your experience?
I think that's actually really good, and I like what you said before about being able to show something tangible. And when we did stylescapes at the group, I remember we used to print them out really nice and big. I remember it made a nice impression with clients when you walk in with this big thing.
The first project we used that for was, you were one of the designers on it, was fun.com.
That's right.
And it was when Henry Min started as creative director. So we have two people to give credit for the stylescapes. Henry Min, who stole it from Digitas, who probably stole it from somewhere else. And keep in mind, this whole idea of originality, I'm still reading on the train the Steve Jobs story, the autobiography, the new one from Isaac, whatever the dude's name is. Great artists steal. That was one of the things. Picasso. It's a quote from Picasso. Great artists steal. Something like that. So let's keep on going. So, all right, Aure. We've done those three things. We've done a user definition, we've done a sitemap, and maybe some wireframes. And now we've done a bit of a stylescape maybe, or some design screens. There's a thing out there, if you Google it, it's called Style Tiles, which is also a very similar technique to do this. And the technique, if you research it, to some degree comes from architecture. Architects show their clients a table or a board or something full of, and fashion designers do it too, of ingredients, of like patterns,
You're developing a language.
You're developing a language.
That's right.
And you have to develop a narrative. One thing that's really important, and one of the okay, so let's move on, and thank you very much to our new integrated content producer, Michael, for telling me to move on and shut the hell up. All right, so let's go into execution now. And execution is interesting because this is where the metal hits the pedal. Okay, so the first part of execution is the wireframes and all the, it's a validation. This is the user experience validation. So user experience 2.1. And goal setting for what we want from a success standpoint, and that's kind of the hypotheses. Mm-hmm. So what is our goal for the application? What is our goal for the project? The universe. And I actually modified the execution phase to include Agile right at the beginning of development, which is kind of weird because why wouldn't you do the first phase in Agile? Well, my experience has been is that Agile is most important in development.
It was made for development.
It was made for development.
That's right.
And in a lot of the projects that I did, that I'm doing now, some in consulting, we end up doing the first part, the inception, without it being in Agile. And then whatever comes out of that is what we use for the planning session.
That's right.
Because for Agile, you need to plan something.
Right.
You need to have a product idea.
You need to have something tangible in order for people to start laying out tasks.
Exactly.
That's right.
And a lot of people have a hard time planning in Agile. Scrum specifically, if you look for that on the Googles, when they don't know what they're building, so they're like, wait, what are we going to build? And that gives me to another insight. Having a process, look, I don't care what it is. Everybody who uses the Skool OS, I tell them, copy it, modify it, do whatever you need, remove as much as you need, use what you feel comfortable with. Having the process, going back to the question of, so how do I go from being an individual to being, my own boss or to having more people? Fundamentally, the one way of doing it is that everybody has a shared language and a shared blueprint that you can use on a project. So you welcome your new people, and you were talking about this, that it has to be about, do they work with a team? Mm-hmm. Does the spirit of the collaboration work? But of course, you share with them, here's the process. Because what happens is if you don't have the process, it's a mess, and you need to be keeping all that in your head, and your head goes, and I shared a story about that this morning also. But so Agile is included here in this particular expression of it in the center part. But interface design, that's where you do comps to start testing. Mm-hmm. And that's where you go into a cycle of user testing. So in here it says user testing, then product revisions. Basically, the product revisions are a result of the user testing. So you do interface designs that are like a prototype, right? Like a paper prototype.
That's right.
You test it. You do revisions to it. Then you start the template preparations. Then you really hit the metal to the pedal when it comes to maybe the rest of the architecture for the site, potentially. Or you've already probably architected a lot of it. My experience has been that during the inception, with a great team member, great architect, we get to architect the majority of the site if you do it really well and you go fast and furious. And that gives you time to iterate now during this phase. So then you go into front-end and back-end development, where we are currently there in the Skool. That's what, if you're curious of where we are in the Skool, the live classes every week or the pro classes, that's where we are right now. This week we're going to be talking about hosting, I think, setup, or actually template preparations. We're somewhere in there. Copywriting is the last thing. You know what? And content gets left out a little bit, like imagery, videography, video editing, animation, content loading. That little section there, that is the
people don't get it.
That is the blind spot for
That's
people.
right.
People think they're building the container, and if you bring back the camera on me, and Google Karen McGrain, the thing that will always nip you in the bud, fundamentally, is that you forgot about what content strategy it is for the site. I actually even have it in a weird place. I have it at the end of the execution phase, because that's usually when you have it as a developer. You do content loading at that point. But content strategy should have happened a lot earlier. And if you look at this version laid out, and I'll bring it actually up in a second here, and you can bring it up once I have it up here. If you look at the visualization of the Skool OS in line, or of the agency version, keeping in mind that this is for a medium boutique or medium-sized agency. So if you want to be a boutique or medium-sized agency, this is how I did it. So I'm not telling you need to do it this way, but it's an option for you. So here I laid it out over time. People ask, like, how long does it take to do all this stuff? Jose, it sounds like it's going to take forever. The goal setting here, but what I wanted to show was that I moved some of the other issues to the forefront. So I think I moved content planning into, you can stagger the steps. So it also depends, yeah, you see here, I moved copywriting to the beginning in the timeline of the execution phase. Does that make sense? So you're doing the content strategy, and it's still probably too late at that point.
Actually, I was going to say, I feel it should be earlier.
It should be much earlier.
Totally.
Yeah, because that's the message.
I'm going to push it up further, yeah.
And that kind of dictates a lot of what the box, the container is going to be. I don't know how many times I've been approached with, can you do this? And my question is, where's the content? And there's no content.
We have this issue all the time. So content is extremely important. It's going to be your blind spot. That's where you're going to screw up, and the client's going to be upset at you.
Plus, not everybody knows how to write for interactive applications, right? For mobile. Or
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by people?
Well, you have to be really concise. You have to communicate things in less words. Sometimes I've been given content decks, and then I try to fit it into some sort of container that I've designed, and it doesn't fit. And you have to end up trying to edit. Right. And then, the copywriter gets upset because you edited his copy. So there's definitely a little bit of experience that's necessary there.
And developers maybe don't, let's say if I'm a WordPress developer, that's all I do, and I'm building a site. A lot of them are smart, and they say, where's the content? I need the content before I even start. So, again, if you split people into the Phaedo, if you're a single person, if you're an individual, you're probably going to be practicing. Somebody's going to come to you to build their site. You might not have the other disciplines in order to do the full project in the caliber that you might need to. So you're really basically depending on the client to have an understanding or know the process sufficiently. But most of the time, they're probably going to be coming to you without knowing. And it's one of the reasons why the Skool, to me, is so important, and why I've done this show for, 106 episodes, is because it's like, gee whiz. Geez-a-loo. If, we don't have the body, the people, whatever, the community, how about that, educated about how to do it, what the steps are, and we don't have the people that are the technical people, the people that build it, the assemblers, the artisanal crafters of websites knowing how to do it, then it's really difficult. And you said it best. Seth said this really well. Look, if you're a developer and if you're a flaky dorky and you don't want to produce something like I didn't, hire a freaking producer. The first position that I hired at the group was a producer. And I tried out different styles of producers. I tried out everything next to Sunday. I fired a few who are still good friends and still awesome people, and love this, love the sin or hate the sin. Alrighty then. The point is that that's the first person you should hire.
That's exactly right. That's the person that's going to help you manage this team and manage all that communication overhead, if that's not something that you're actively wanting to do.
Yeah, I was just having lunch with a friend from Art Center, Rudy from Pastilla Studios, Rudy Manning, and we were talking about this. Is that one of the most important people he's hired in his studio is a producer, and lo and behold, that is definitely one of the most important persons to hire. So finally, the launch stage, let's go through this so that we don't go too much over time. The launch conference is coming up now in a few weeks, in 4 weeks. If you are not there, you are square. So the 3.1, the launch plan. Look, having a QA process, even knowing what a QA process is important with your client, the back and forth, how do you track it? Setting up how you're going to analyze the success, coaching your client on the site administration, multivariant testing. It's a fancy word for A/B testing, A/B testing, not AV testing. Dealing with the marketing of the site, partners for, distribution and celebrating. Why is celebration in there? Like the parties in the process? Woo, we launched. Yeah, make sure you pat yourself on the back for successfully launch it, and make sure you pre-schedule that and you show that to the client, because everybody wants to
I think it's actually
be acknowledged.
really important, because like on the way to launch, there's so much friction. and there's so much and then people are running around with their heads cut off like chickens with their heads cut off. It's nice to get to that point, and then everybody's friends. Like, oh, we did it, but there was all this stress leading up to it.
It's a bonding experience.
It is a bonding experience.
The alcohol helps, and everybody
true.
kind of gets back together and say, hey, we hated each other a week ago, but now we love each other. You brought up an interesting point, and that actually really, I'm not going to go on a huge tangent, but I'm going to talk about it, so remind me what the point is. It's just a point, but just say, hey, what was that point? So 3.2, the final part, analysis. So this is really where I will admit that, in our practice, we really focus on the building it and said, good luck, Mr. Client. But really, in my journey here, and now that I'm doing my own startup, and now that I really have become very present to and very conscious about this idea that really you have to measure. And measurement, even though I'm a creative and quantifiable information is not my friend, measurement is extremely important. Linda has some really cool Google Analytics courses. If you go to lynda.com, and you can sign up for the 7-day free trial if you visit lynda.com. And I have a lot of really exciting stuff that we're going to be doing with Linda this fall, spring? What season are we in? Spring. This spring. That's why I'm wearing a hoodie, which, by the way, is a new hoodie. I had to supplement my red hoodie because the other one looked like I've been wearing it every day, but which is probably true. The idea, though, is that analytics and the stuff is simpler than you think. Just spend half an hour on lynda.com. Looking at analytics for how to do it, how to Google Analytics. If you're creative and you don't even want to deal with that, ask a friend, take them out to dinner, do whatever you need to do. But get familiar with what it is, even if you don't know what it is, at least, or even if you don't do it, at least know what it is and what it sounds like. So that's the final part of the process, because that's where you're going to begin dealing with, what the success is. Is the work I'm doing successful? Release planning is part of that kind of final thing. It looks like it's way too far out there in the end. I'm going to have to move that around. Really revising the features and what's working and what's not working is something that's going to happen afterwards. And it depends on how much service you're offering to your client. But the point I wanted to make before, damn it, I forgot. But we talked about that, about services, without using the metaphor that we were using outside, which was crass. The difference between an individual and an agency, or a boutique agency even, is what?
It's scale, right? It's providing more value, I think. It's providing different types of talent. It's providing a full service package as opposed to one component of the whole thing. And oftentimes I think it's providing an end-to-end experience and beyond that. So there is life after launch, like you're saying, right? Like you launch this thing and you see what works and what doesn't, and then you re-engage with the client to see what you can improve on, like where the product needs to go, as opposed to, like you said it, just launching and then the next day you stop answering emails.
That's how you usually do it. Admit it. That's right. Okay, if you have not responded to a client because you're afraid of not being done with their work, you're overwhelmed, you have a headache. Like me, the story I told this morning in my interview is that I thought I had a brain tumor when I started the group because I was so stressed out over a project. I went to the hospital, paid $3,000 for an MRI. And this is a true story. And 2 weeks later, the doctor said there's nothing, we don't know. 2 weeks later, the project ended and my headache went away. And I'm like, woo, it was the damn project. So I want you guys, I'm going to do something totally crazy. So in a few weeks, in about 3-4 weeks, we're actually going to re-release Agency in a Box, which is something that we did for you guys before. I want you guys to leave your comments on Facebook. And I don't know if we have a title card, but it's really facebook.com/webdesign rocks. Or you know what? Use facebook.com/theschoolrocks. Is that the right one?
I think so.
Facebook.com/theschoolrocks. Use that one. Go to Facebook, facebook.com/theschoolrocks. We're going to put it down below in YouTube for you guys. If you're listening to this, go online and Google it. And leave your biggest challenges. I want to get people to list, this is my biggest challenge, share it with you as a web designer, as a web developer, as a strategist, as whatever role you play or whatever you do. You could be an entrepreneur, you can be a business owner. Leave your biggest challenges. I'm going to select for next week one person and I'm going to give them the current version that we have of Agency in a Box, which we have on my screen. So if you go to myschooltools.com, you'll get to see Agency in a Box. You'll get to see the Merge conference and a lot of the stuff that we're doing, courtesy of our friends at Shopify, who are awesome. And we've been selling it for $1,000, but also for during our webinars, we sell it for a discounted price of like $700. But we're going to release a small version of the Skool Agency in a Box kit for about $420 in honor of Aure. Actually, no, it's going to be $429, not $420 by itself. But anyway, the point is that before we release that, I'm going to be giving one of these away every week. So, but the deal is, you have to go to facebook.com/theschoolrocks and leave us your experience. I'm personally going to choose, and I'll ask Aure and Tatjana what the best, who to give it to every week.
Oh, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are we going to do like a drawing?
We're going to do a drawing like we used to, and you're going to get an
Yeah.
Agency in a Box. And what the heck is Agency in a Box? Just read the description and go to myschooltools.com and check it out. It's basically everything that I used to run the group. Now I'm giving it to you. All the process stuff I just talked about. All right, so I'm done with that. And what do you guys think? Give me a summary of the episode. How did I do? Could I do better?
I really like the diagram, the way you've modified it. I really like that you put Agile after that initial discovery phase. I think that it helps to mitigate a lot of the friction that one has with creative teams. Because, creative people don't like to work in Agile.
No.
No, they don't. I think it's really great. I actually want to look at it in more detail because it's changed a little bit since the last time I
Yes.
saw it. Okay.
It has.
Well, my favorite aspect is really the Inception phase, because it also relates to the content creation, which is really all about the message. What's the point? Why are we doing all of this? And just like Aure said earlier, we create these containers, but if the content and the message is not clear and not there, and why we're doing that, why are we creating a container around it? So my specific interest is really the Inception phase and content creation.
And it's a perfect transition to the issue that, one of the realizations that I had, and Tatjana is a manifestation of that, is that what I learned in the user experience process, this idea that you define who you are, the brand, the website, you define the community that you're going to be serving, that you're going to be helping and interacting with, then you define the goals that you have together with that community. You guys have seen the past seasons of, the This Week in Web Design, especially the first season. We did this process live for you on air, and it's probably the most popular set of episodes, which, by the way, we're going to repeat them again this year at some point during the year. The realization I had is that this is also the same formula. User experience, what has developed because of the internet, is the same formula for living a full life. It's the same formula.
Right.
It's almost like there's this weird thing that where user experience, process, and conscious living
Right.
are almost in parallel to each other, which then brought us to the other thing where I noticed that, look, we have a lot of women who are transitioning from creative jobs, whether it's print to web or whether it's, banking to web or, like Cheryl Anderson and yourself, whatever that transition might be, that you really want to live an authentic life and merge your passion with your profession. I noticed that was happening a lot, that the people that were coming were, ooh, I want to be a web consultant, or I want to work in this digital space. So much to the degree that we saw the numbers and we said, you know what, let's actually do an event just for women, and it's coming up on March 2nd, and we're going to record an extra segment after this
Yes.
to talk about it. But in one sentence, what is Merge?
Merge is a 2-day conference for women who want to merge their passion and their purpose with their profession. And it's really a wide spectrum of women. It doesn't really matter what our roles are and our current tasks that we're executing. There seems to be a common thread that everybody's looking for something deeper, something more meaningful. And how can we merge that all together into one livelihood?
Awesome. And I'm really excited to be helping Tatjana produce this. Guys, if you're disappointed and you're like, oh, this is ladies only, don't worry. We're actually going to be doing a conference at the end of this year that will be co-ed, but for the first conference that we're going to be doing, it's going to be ladies only, and it's coming up soon. If you have any questions, if you want to get the process that I just shared, if you want to get that poster that I just shared, email me or tweet me. You can tweet me at Jose Caballero, It's right there below on the comments. You can follow Aure at Aurepa. You can follow Tatjana at Tatjana Luethi. All of the things are in the comments below. Leave us freaking comments below. And remember, it's not about technology. What you do, this web design thing, this right here, this should be This Week in Being Freaking Human. We're not working. It's not about technology. The future is not about technology. You saw it here first. The future is about user experience. It's about human experience. Technology is but a mediator. Mediator, that's the wrong pronunciation. All right, I sound like I need a big Mexican hat, sombrero. It's a mediator. Technology is just a mediator that is allowing us to be more interconnected, and it's allowing a lot of you to have jobs helping other people create their platforms for the interwebs and for this global network. But it's really not about technology. It's about collaboration. Remember that. And if you don't remember that, you're pretty much screwed. So thank you very much for watching today. See you next week when you watch us actually collaborate. When you watch us collaborate. That sounds weird. When you watch us work. See you next week.